Attitudable opens the doors to a new world of people transforming lives and the way we do business. Today, I have the privilege of talking to Dr. Linden. Dr. Linden Brown has worked as a management consultant, academic, and an entrepreneur in startup organizations. For more than 20 years, he has worked with multinational firms in North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific to develop their market-focused capabilities and business strategies. He has had visiting professor appointments at several universities, including INSEAD in France, Cranfield in England, and the University of Technology in Sydney. Linden, a customer culture expert par excellence, has published 14 books on management, marketing, and strategy. Today, we welcome Dr. Linden Brown. Welcome to our podcast.
Thanks very much, Dolores. It's very nice to be talking with you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, for your book that we know that you are writing like an update for your very famous book. If you would like to tell us more about it.
Yes, well, probably I should start by talking a little bit about how I became interested in and worked in customer-centric culture and customer centricity in businesses. And it really started with my studies in marketing, where I became interested and started to realize that the customer was very, very important for all organizations, whether they are profit-based organizations or non-profits or even government public service organizations. And it really came home to me, this whole question of culture, when I was doing some corporate training programs in marketing in a number of the large American technology companies. And one of these I remember was Hewlett-Packard, or HP, as we call them, in Silicon Valley in California. And I was doing a series of marketing strategy programs with the marketing people there. And these were being done not only in California, but around the world. And what I found was that when I went back to talk to the marketing people after these programs I had run, I asked them, what did you do as a result of this? And basically they all came back and said, we didn't do anything. We loved the course, we learned a lot, but we haven't done anything with it. And in fact, one of them said to me, what actually happens in our part of the business, which is in marketing and sales, is that we have people in the product area that make the products. We have people that organize the processes and systems and so on. But when the products become available, and this was the term that was used, they just throw them over the wall. And in marketing and sales, they hope that we will catch these products and find customers for them. And so it occurred to me that there was a very big disconnect, not only in that particular company, but many other large companies, between different functions in the business. And there wasn't a unity of purpose or focus around the customer. And I realized it was cultural. So with that finding, I suppose, I said, well, with an academic background as well as teaching in corporate businesses, I probably should really research this. It seemed to me that customer-focused businesses were more successful, they grew more rapidly, they were more profitable. But what is customer centricity? What is a customer-centric culture? How would we define that? And once we define it, can we actually measure it? And if we can measure it, is it important? Does it actually connect with business performance? And does it connect with people in the business? So they were the questions that were set out. And I had a team of probably 5 people. We got together and we worked for about 3 years on this. Firstly, by talking to leaders in large companies that we thought were highly customer-centric. And then after that, we did a large quantitative study where we looked to measure the factors or the behaviours, or if you like, instead, the practices that these highly customer-centric companies carry out or do. And as a result of that work, we did actually come up with a set of factors. I call them disciplines or practices that those companies actually engage in and day out. They do it all the time. And from that, we developed this idea around 8 separate disciplines that help to make a customer culture in a business tangible. Because the problem, Dolores, in many companies, even small companies, is that once you start talking about culture, it becomes a bit fluffy, we often say.
What is culture?
It's hard to, what is culture? You can talk about it, I can talk about it, somebody else can talk about it. And, there are different views on what it is. And particularly when you talk about a customer-centric culture, again, there are different views. And one of the things we did was we asked a lot of companies, and not only the highly customer-centric companies, but others, do you think you're customer-centric? Do you have a culture around customer centricity? And generally, 90% of people, leaders in these companies said, yes, of course we do. Customers are our lifeblood. And then we asked some of their customers, and only a small percentage of those customers actually agreed. So we had a kind of 90-10 split on this. 90% of leaders said we're highly customer-centric. Only 10% of customers agreed with that. So there's obviously a big gap in reality here. And so that was how I really became interested in this. And as a result of that study, we developed later on, we published a book on it, The Customer Culture Imperative, and we laid out the research and also the background of what this really means and how it should work.
And all the framework, and everything else you continue and you go on with all the research, how important it was that. So you found that the need to work on that and the necessity of people to be fully aware of that, because there was a lack of perhaps awareness of that even the word, as you said, what is culture? Because every company has its own culture. As you said in your book, I will quote a part when you says, customer culture is as fundamental to business performance as breathing is to living. It is the life force of your business. You only have a sustainable business if it is driven by a customer culture. So while I read that, it made me realize that sometimes these small, middle-sized or big, perhaps big companies, as well too, they are not even aware of their own culture or how they infuse that culture with their own employees and customers and everyone. So it was very profound, your finding, let's say, and then all the research that you developed.
Yes, so I think, the question that you can ask about this is, where would you start with this? And I think, we talk about a phase in a series of phases in developing a strong customer culture. And the first one is really what we call discovery. That is, let's find out where we are now, because once we find that out, we then have an opportunity to say, well, where do we want to go and what do we need to do to get there as far as the culture is concerned around the customer. And that's why I think that a starting point, even if you're actually an organization that feels that you have a strong customer culture, you should start with measurement, because measurement actually makes it tangible for people. Everybody in the organisation then can see one picture around this. And then and what I say to leaders is, if you don't know where you are, how can you make changes that are effectively going to take you forward? You can make changes without that knowledge, but as we say in advertising, half our advertising is wasted, but we don't know which half. And the same applies to investments in customer experience. You can invest in customer experience, but you need to be investing in the right things around customer experience. And the only way you're going to know where you stand is to start with that discovery process. So I think that that's an important starting point, and it's to do with measurement of the culture, which we can now do. And also, of course, getting feedback from customers. Both of those things become important to discovering where we actually are in our organisation.
So like a guiding, like a map, so like a frame, as you mentioned, like where, or how to do that, how to implement and put that into practice.
Yeah, one of the hardest things, Dolores, I think, is for people in an organisation to actually see where we are. And you need, some people can do that. They can just visualise where we might be. But most of us need some sort of a picture and then a roadmap. And it's a little bit like COVID. I mean, in our country here in Australia, where I'm living right now, we're talking about a roadmap out of COVID, a roadmap to freedom. And, the same thing applies with customer culture. There needs to be a roadmap through to a strong, sustainable culture, which is going to guarantee the sustainability and growth and profitability and so on of the business. And I think that one of the things that's often not realised in companies is that you can have initiatives on customer experience, but if it's not supported, it's like my marketing training of HP and other companies. If it's not supported by the culture, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be supported by other functions in the organisation.
Yes, so true. And Dr. Brown, how do you think it's different, that way of implementing? Does it differ from small or medium and big companies, the way you put that into practice, the way of implementing the culture awareness?
I think it does vary, because in large businesses that are long established businesses, they've been around for 50, 100 years, and they're large and they have a lot of products and services. They have many business units. You can think of big banks, for example, in the financial industry. They have a history of, I'll tell you maybe a little story about a bank where we did an investigation, and we talked to the people at the front line, and we asked them the question, what do you think your job is? These are tellers in branches of banks. And their answer was, we're here to protect the bank. Right? So, this has got nothing to do with customers. In fact, this is a time when there were screens there and so on. And, I could tell you a lot of stories about this, but we don't have time. But I think that, it's with those sort of large businesses, it takes quite a lot of time to bring about cultural change, although it can happen fairly quickly if you have the right CEO leader and also leadership team. And I'll give you an example of that. Now, Air New Zealand, you will have heard of as one of the global airline companies based in New Zealand, in my part of the world here near Australia. Probably about 10 or 12 years ago, they were a government-owned business, and they posted the biggest corporate loss in New Zealand's history. And it was in the billions of dollars loss. And so they brought in a new CEO, and his name was Sir Ralph Norris. And he started off by bringing the leaders together and talking with them about what do we actually do here at Air New Zealand. And some people, you will appreciate this actually with words and translating words and giving meaning to words. Some people said, well, you know, we fly planes. Other people said, well, we move freight from, you know, one location to another. We have, you know, baggage handlers. We have all of these functions. And somebody in the business said, no, what we really do is we fly people. So that created a different meaning for Air New Zealand. And you can imagine what that would do when you say, okay, my job is to clean the planes. Why am I doing this? Because we're flying people. My job is at the ticket counter. You know, why am I here? I'm here to help fly people. So, you know, language like that, this is why language is so important, which is where your role is so critical here, because it's to create meaning around what we do in our business. So in that instance, they were able to bring that business to a loss from a big loss to a profit in 2 years. But that is unusual. It usually takes more time than that. In smaller businesses, you can actually make change more quickly, but you still have the same types of issues. You still have businesses that have been there for a long time, having people that resist change. And so you have to find a way of getting all of those people on board with change around the customers, particularly people in the non-customer facing parts of the business, like finance, like IT, even HR to some extent, human resources, recruitment, operations. A lot of those areas are what we call sort of backline areas. You know, in football, you know, you kind of have the front line and you have the back line, and the same thing applies to businesses. Now, the front line people are working with customers all the time. They understand that, but the back line people don't. And so that's what stops change, even in small, medium, and certainly in large businesses. So there are differences. It takes longer in large businesses that are long established. But it's interesting when you look at more recent businesses that were launched in the last 20 years, they have become typically much more customer focused and been able to retain that. Not always retain that, but they've had a better chance of retaining that customer focus.
Great, amazing. And do you think that this like empowerment that you just mentioned has been challenged, or it's more, or it's easier perhaps with this pandemic that we faced, how people are more prone to that movement, to that change in companies, to be like more working like more as a team altogether, or it's more difficult or easier with this like uncertainty, fear, well, all mixed of emotions that we are facing?
I think COVID has helped leaders of companies and certainly teams to understand, firstly, that customers are very, very important. And secondly, that they need to work together to help deliver services and products to their customers, and to do it more quickly and to do it in a different way. However, I think it still comes down to the mindset of the leader and the mindset of employees in the business. And if that doesn't change permanently as a result of COVID, you're still going to have what still predominantly exists in most organisations that are profit based organisations, it still can leave those people with profit outweighing what you're actually doing for customers, and not understanding that if you do what we say, and this is probably a statement that we would use in our business a lot, and in talking with these people, what's best for the customer is actually best for the business. And that is a mindset thing, and it doesn't mean that you give everything to the customer that they want or they ask for, but it means that you understand that if you have the right strategy with your marketplace and targeting products and services to appropriate markets and customers, if you have a culture that focuses on creating value for those customers and customer experience, great customer experiences, it will flow into better profit growth and sustainable business. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. There's our evidence, plus there are a lot of other studies that have supported those links. But a lot of leaders still have difficulty moving their mindset from focusing on profit as against focusing on the customer first.
Yeah.
So I think we'll probably, to answer your question, we'll probably have more companies that will become aware that being customer focused is fundamental. But I think there'll still be a lot of businesses that go back to the profit first thing. And part of it is they don't know what to do to actually move from that mindset to the customer mindset.
Yes, because sometimes it's difficult to find the way or where to go if we want to improve, as you said, like the way the company is doing, like the profits and all that. All right. And sorry.
I was going to say that I think one of the industries to look at for guidance for many, many companies, even though it's an industry at the moment that is suffering, is the hospitality industry. So if you look at hotel chains and you look at entertainment companies like Disney, for example, they are a good guide as to both the mindset and the things that you do, which are the practices that you carry out, to be customer centric. I think it's important for businesses to look outside their industry to those industries where we see very high level of customer centricity in those businesses. And I'll just give you a little example. What I found in that industry, for example, the hospitality and entertainment industry, is that and we're not able to do this at the moment, but when we go back to traveling and we stay in hotels and so on, in the really good hotels, you might ask a member of staff to do something for you. It might be to call a taxi or an Uber to go to the airport. And the very good organisations, the answer that they give is consider it done. Now that response, I might have asked somebody who it's not their responsibility to call a taxi, but they're all trained to say consider it done, which means it doesn't mean I'll try to do that or I'll talk to somebody else about doing that, but just consider it done. Now that has two meanings for the customer. One is that, okay, I don't need to worry about that anymore. It will be done. And the other thing is for the staff. And it creates this teamwork. Okay, it's not my responsibility, but it's your responsibility. I'll talk to you and I'll know that you will do it because consider it done. So, that's, again, language and meaning in words that impact both the customer and employees and teams in the business.
Yes, so powerful and so empowering, like the power of that. Four words. Yeah. No, 3 words. Consider it done. 3 words that say it all.
They do say it all. They do say it all. And
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of Amazon, you know, the key two words in Amazon is customer obsession. That's what they live by. And I think the interesting thing, it's worth studying Amazon and the history. And there is a book that's out fairly recently called Working Backwards. And that was written by two insiders from Amazon who worked there in senior positions for 10 or more years. And they talk about everything that goes to support customer obsession in that particular business. And they talk also in Amazon about every day is day one. That is, we don't want to change from that original concept of being customer focused in this business and delivering value and service to customers as the focal point of this business. Every day is day one. And I think Jeff Bezos was very successful in implanting that whole set of thinking. But the two words there are customer obsession. What are we about? Customer obsession. And, you know, you have other companies where they have words like the Virgin Group with Richard Branson. You know, they talk about in most of those businesses, you know, there are a couple of things I think that are significant around words. One is brilliant basics with a touch of magic. So, you know, that's how they talk about doing things well for customers. And then a touch of magic is the emotional connection.
Yes.
And they also have another saying in there, and I'll just make this and then you come back to your question. They also say in there is always another way. And that kind of promotes continuous improvement in what we're doing.
Yes, and participation, no? Like the teamwork that you always mention.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. And how important is that? And also what you state all over your very famous book, The Customer Centric Imperative. Why that word imperative? Why did you use that word on the title?
To me, when I wrote that book, I thought that the word imperative means that you must do it. That's
essential.
That's what I felt about it. It's imperative that you do it. So, like with your children, you know, you'll give them messages about things that they must do. It's imperative. I mean, this is imperative that you do that.
You have to eat. Yes.
Yeah, this is why I use that word in the title. That it was, I felt, imperative, and I think it's imperative now. It's even more imperative.
It keeps on,
but in many ways, it's always been imperative, I think. But it depends on circumstances and so on.
Yeah. Sure. And you told me that you are writing an update to this very famous book to be launched this year or next year, right?
I think right at the end of this year it will be launched. And there are, I think, two things that are part of this. One is that since the first book was written and published, I think in 2014, we did more research and we identified another discipline, which we call empowerment. So in the book, that 2014 book, there were 7 disciplines that we talked about, laid out in the initial research that was done probably 5-6 years previous to that research. And now, since that time, we did more research and we identified empowerment as a very, very important factor. And we've added that to make an 8th discipline. So that will be laid out. So in this new book, I think there will be the 8 disciplines. There will be much more around how do we engage leaders and teams in the business around customer culture, and what are some of the best practices for actually doing that and creating inspiration and motivation around that. And the other thing that we'll be including there is a study that we're just launching now called the Market Culture Global 300 study. And here we are looking for 300 companies around the world to participate in a study where, with a small number of leaders, a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 8 in each company, complete our survey, which is just the quantitative part of the survey, which allows us to give those companies that participate a measurement of where they are now. Now, it's only from a small sample, so to do it really in a big way, you would need to have a lot more people involved in completing the survey or the assessment, as we call it. And this is using the tool which is called the Market Responsiveness Index, or the MRI. So an MRI in English is a bit like a scan that you have of your health.
It's a health-related word.
We call it the MRI. So again, another word that has some sort of other meaning as well as this.
Yes.
It stands for us for Market Responsiveness Index. So there's an opportunity for companies in Argentina, for example, to participate in this study without cost, which would give them a starting point around a conversation on where do we actually stand in customer culture. So there, what we'll be doing is providing each company with their own short report, which will show a picture of where they stand against our database of more than 500 companies around the world, which includes the most customer-centric companies in the world. So they'll be benchmarked against the most customer-centric companies, which is a guide, and they'll get a report on that. And then the other thing we'll be doing is providing an overall report, which will show average results by industry, by region of the world, by size of company. So some of those results will be included in this next book. Not all of them. There'll be a separate report there that is provided for that particular study, but some important conclusions will come from that, and some industry comparisons, some regional comparisons around the world will be compared as well. So this is something, I mean, I would love to have a number of companies in Argentina involved in this particular study. As I said, it's without cost, no cost. It will take those people who complete it about 10 minutes of their time.
It's short.
Because, it's not much time. But it needs to be companies that are participating should be companies where the leaders say, yes, it's important for us to know this and to make a start on this. Even if we feel we are very strong, at least we'll have some idea of where we stand against the most customer-centric companies in the world. So, we've got in our database Amazon, Google, Virgin, Starbucks, IKEA, Lego, big brands from around the world. They're all in the database. So it provides, and we've got others in the database that are not known around the world, and some of them are very strong and some are not so strong on customer culture. So it's a good, diverse database across many industries. So that's, in answer to your question about the next book, that will include some of that information. But I think more importantly, I want to have people in companies much more aware about the importance or the imperative of customer culture, and make a start on that through measurement.
That's very interesting. We'll write all the links on the show notes for people also to participate and be able to do the survey and see and have the feedback, of your own company, and also try to be authentic, because sometimes we think we are strong in some area, or we are, everything's fine, and in fact it's not. So we have to be
Yep.
like honest, or more authentic with our own strengths and weaknesses, and see what has to
Absolutely.
be improved.
It's very important because you want it to be as real as possible. You want it to be as close to the truth as possible.
Yes, that's
And
right.
when we use the MRI in companies commercially, and we do that all the time, we have quite a lot of open-ended questions, which provides qualitative feedback and helps people understand in their business why the scores on the chart are what they are. In this research study, we're not doing that because we think at this point, people don't have enough time. They haven't used it before to spend time, because that takes about 20 minutes to complete the MRI assessment. Yeah, so we're only doing really the quantitative part, where it's rating scales on practices around 8 disciplines. Plus there will be, I think, one open-ended question at the end, that's all. So about 10 minutes to complete that.
Perfect, to the point and concise. That's your
exactly.
idea.
Yeah.
And Linden, as well, I met you last year at the World Marketing Summit that was always hosted by Mr. Philip Kotler, and that last year, due to the pandemic, was the first virtual one. So it was easier for some people like me who live in the end of the world, and it's more difficult.
Well, we live at the end of the world in Australia also.
Yes, but I think that you are closer to everything. Yes, and I loved your session. You were a speaker there, and I would also like to know what's for you, what play does attitude and communication and engaging with different people all over the world, different companies, mean for you, for your business throughout your very extensive career in this field. What do you think?
Look, I think that attitudes are very, very important. I would say first that to be customer-centric, you need to be human-centric. It's actually about people. And your attitude to people becomes an important driver for what you do. And it's interesting with, there's a little bit of a cliche around people that study finance, for example. I'd say, oh, that person's an accountant. So they don't want to talk to anybody. They just want to deal with numbers. That person there is a salesperson. All they want to do is talk. And they don't want to do any reports or anything. They just want to talk.
It's impossible.
Now, these are extremes. And it doesn't have to be like that. I think the most important thing to create an attitude around people, because after all, in the end, even an accountant has a family and has loved ones and has relationships and so on. And here we're talking about having that with customers. And for those people in more of the back line of the business to develop a customer-centered attitude, they must experience customers. They are a customer themselves, so they know what it's like to get a bad experience. But they need to hear from customers about their good experiences and their bad experiences. So attitude can be changed and can be affected by actual customer interaction and customer experience. And my first training was in finance and accounting.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that, what I love to do was to balance sheets and do profit and loss statements. I'd love to do that with numbers. Yeah, loved it. But I worked with a company called Cadbury's, which actually makes chocolates. I don't know.
Delicious chocolates. Yes.
Yeah. So, I joined Cadbury's because I loved eating chocolates. And one of the things you could do was, you could eat as much chocolate as you liked on premises. You couldn't take any chocolate home. So after about a year, I had to go to the dentist, and the dentist said, "You have to leave Cadbury's." But I started with Cadbury's, and I got to understand about customers from Cadbury's. And I joined a supermarket in England, and I started working in London in a supermarket. Mm-hmm. And I got an insight around customers when I was working in the supermarket in the bread department. And in the bread department, I was in charge of bread, basically. Bringing the bread in, putting it on the shelves, putting prices on the bread, all that sort of thing. But what I noticed in this particular supermarket was Sainsbury's in London, big supermarket, still runs today, Sainsbury's, was that our customers were mainly at that time, they were ladies, and they were very, very short. They were only that high when they stood up. Now, this was funny. I don't know why it was like that. But anyway, I remember one of my ex-Cadbury people who was in sales said to me, "Linden, you've got to observe customers. You must talk to customers, ask them a question." And so on one particular occasion, there was a very short lady came in and she selected some bread. And so I said to her, "Why did you buy that bread?" And she said, "I can't reach that bread up there." Which was
so simple.
Which was kind of an insight. She wanted that bread up there, but she couldn't reach it. So I thought, amazing. We need to know more about why customers buy things. And I was very young then, and that was an insight for me. And so I think, it's what I'm saying is that kind of experience, if you can have it whether you work in finance or in IT, is something that helps you develop an attitude around customer centricity and being customer focused as an individual. And in the work that you do, in the impact that you have on the experience of customers, and every function has that impact. So I think that attitude is very, very important. I would say that another thing that's important around customer culture really is taking responsibility for doing the right thing for customers. And if we come back to that statement, consider it done, that's taking responsibility. That's an example. So both of those things are actually, I think, very, very important. And I mean, the importance of words and so on in what you do in your translation services and so on, and the importance of culture, because in the end, what's got to be created, I think, is meaning for people. So where this often breaks down in companies is, we have a strategy, we communicate that strategy, but people further down in the business don't understand it. It hasn't created meaning for them, and they don't know how to act on it. And I think that leads then to this question of being able to communicate in a way that's meaningful with words, but also is motivational. And in today's world, with younger people coming into important roles in businesses and organisations around the world, they want purpose. Why am I doing this here? Why am I working for this company? What am I contributing? They need that purpose, and it's got to go beyond profit. It's got to, and the best way of unifying it is around customer. That's the purpose.
So true.
We know that from studies that I've done and others have done, that if there's higher customer engagement and higher customer satisfaction, there's higher employee engagement and satisfaction.
Everything
That's a
is
fact.
related. It's like a circle. Everything is related.
It is. It is. Yep.
Very insightful. Well, we will continue reading your next book and all the research and everything that you continuously write and share. So thanks a lot, Dr. Linden, for all your insights, for your experience and your knowledge. And thanks a lot for being part of this space. Thank you.
I'm very pleased, Doris. Thanks very much for the opportunity. And I hope that we can see some Argentinian companies involved in our research. I'd love to welcome them to that.
Yes, for sure. It's a very good opportunity to be more aware of our own culture and knowledge and awareness and everything related to our way to improvement, let's say, to move forward.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Pleasure.